Students, I wanted to give you a little bit of a supplement to the lecture regarding Microsoft Word and basically about page layout. As you know, Microsoft Word is a premier software application for word processing, for spell check, thesaurus. We want to find synonyms, antonyms. You want to find definitions. You want content, typographical or written content to be accurate. Microsoft Word is the software of choice, and people use it universally. It's ubiquitous. It's like the air we breathe. It's everywhere. Uh, but I'm going to take it from a little bit different angle. If you were given a Word, MS Word as a word processor, how can you use that as a tool that can be also aesthetically pleasing and can actually drive home your message in a clear way than just simply black words on a white background with a somewhat readable typeface? Uh, Basic design, where especially page layout, is based upon 3 or 4 different things. You know the design principles, design elements and principles, which we mentioned a bit earlier. Those may seem a little abstract to you because we're not talking about architecture or sculpture or fashion or a painting. We're simply talking about a page that's 8.5 by 11 typically. But we do know this, there needs to be a focal point, something needs to dominate, and typically that's a headline or it's an image. And you can make the decision first. Do you want that image to be seen first, or you want that headline to be read first? One of those is probably going to be your top priority. And that's what we call hierarchy, a visual hierarchy. You want to be drawn into that front door. If I looked at a building, let's say I was passing by some federal building there, and there's like 20 ways to get into that building, how do I know which one to go to? If I'm just visiting, I'm a first-time guest. Well, typically there are some indicators. There might be a sidewalk, there may be signage, there may be some kind of a sculptural piece or architectural piece that says basically, come this way, this is important, this is the main entrance. So the visual passageway to your document that you're designing needs to be something primary. And typically it's that headline unless you want them to see the image first. So you make that determination. Don't let the computer make it for you. That's where you become a compositor. You become the designer. And another thing that's nice about design, after you get through the front door, where do you go? Basically, if you've read the headline, you've seen a primary image. If you're interested to read further, where do you go? Where is that first paragraph? I know that as English speakers and Westerners, we typically read from top to bottom, left to right. Well, it makes natural sense for us to start there. But you could make the first sentence perhaps bold. You would make the first character or word perhaps larger, what we call a drop cap, or maybe it's a raised cap. You could do both of those in Microsoft Word. Basically, it's a signal indicator. Say, read me first. We read that first paragraph. Maybe you read 3 or 4 paragraphs and it's getting kind of long. You don't want the line length on a page to be so long that people's eyes track and read that same line over and over again. So you want to keep some columns going, especially if it gets very wide and lengthy. That's why magazines are so much more readable than novels typically. People can read a short little snippet at a time and then feel like they've accomplished something. We can separate paragraphs with something called a pull quote. Maybe change the color, maybe make it italics, maybe make it a little larger, and it's an interesting sentence or sentence fragment that's just pulled out of the text and put in there as something to kind of prompt the reader to continue on. In the background throughout the rest of this, I just want to have a slideshow going of both good and bad layout designs to kind of build up an acumen for you, an ability and sensibility about what is good or poor design when it comes to basic page layout. We don't want to stretch type. We don't want to stretch images. Type has been designed with a certain amount of integrity. The horizontal strokes are meant to be a certain width compared to the vertical strokes. When you begin to shear, distort, and skew those, we've ruined the integrity of that typeface. Oh, sure, it might look cool and actually fit into the spot that you had ordained that it would be, but now the typeface is no longer Gill Sans or Palatino or Times New Roman or whatever it was. It's something a little bit destroyed. The same is true for images. How many times have you seen images, like you'll probably see in the slideshow behind me, where people look like they're 10 foot tall, or they look like they've been compressed, just somehow to make them fit into a square or a shape? We don't want to do that to images. It's much more accurate and better to just simply crop them appropriately. So look at that page like it was your canvas, or like it was a room that you were decorating. You're going to be composing 3 things: type, text, and images. You might have 2 images, you might have 3, you might have 1. You might have text blocks, which are like columns of text or blocks of text. You may have 3 words as a headline or 6 words as a headline. You may have a subheading. You may have subheaders. So I think your hierarchy should be, in type especially, you should have a headline that's big, the biggest type. The next biggest should be some kind of tagline or subtitle if you need such. The author's name might be, a little bit smaller than headline for sure, but it may not be more important than one of your subheadings that says introduction or conclusion or whatever. In your assignment, it's pretty well spelled out, and I give you plenty of examples how to treat this. And as you see scrolling behind this video are some samples and poor and good usage of design. I don't want things to be busy. I know you were given a minimum of 750 words, but you can certainly make the type smaller. Typically, we think type's got to be 12 points. I mean, your default is always black type on a white background, 12 point, Times New Roman. And if you're doing reports, it's always been double spaced, right? Well, we can change the line height or the leading in between lines of type to let it breathe a little bit more. You can make the type smaller. It can be 9 or 10 points. This isn't the age of the old manual typewriter, so type can be a bit smaller. But if you're like me and you wear glasses, sometimes you appreciate large type, but I tell you what, I'm actually kind of in love with small type because it gives more room on the page for other things to happen. And I'll fight to read that type a little bit more if it's just kind of got some empty white space around it to kind of breathe. Look at how the images integrate, and you're gonna build up an understanding and a little sensitivity about design and aesthetics. You'll probably not look at documents anymore. You may be bored with the ones you've done in the past. You'll look at maybe at your resume, or even boring things like annual reports. That's a huge field for graphic designers. We design annual reports for clients because they're typically boring charts and graphs and numbers. They're just tables of information and data. So how do you make that interesting for the viewer or the reader? Well, you use good design aesthetics. Let's see if there's anything else. Formatting. Typically, you're always given in design and art. You're always given formats. Your canvas is going to be 10 foot by 10 foot. Fashion design. Your model is going to be 6'1" and a certain winter or season it's got to be designed for. There's always limitations, but within those limitations, it's a huge amount of freedom to be creative. So you've been given some limitations because there's some things I have you avoid, and there's some things that I tell you must do. But within that, you will see. So far, there's 11 students in this course. There may be more later. There'll be such diversity and range. It'll be interesting to see the multiple solutions that we come up with one common project. Anything else about Microsoft Word? It's a wonderful tool. Some people can actually use it as a design tool. It's not the easiest tool to design with and to lay out. It's not like Adobe InDesign, but it's certainly a more popular tool because everyone seems to have the Office suite. So if you can do incredibly beautiful things with Microsoft Word, imagine what you could do with InDesign, which we'll work on later. So good luck with your project, and I look forward to seeing the solutions real soon.